reason for that. Because. And so how do you say to someone, you know what, I cook, I'm a chef, I'm also a historic interpreter, I'm also a culinary historian, and I am a food critic. I'm a food critic of white supremacy and American food culture. And all of that comes through when people talk about food, or when I'm gardening, right? When I'm gardening, it's a lesson in culture, history. The pre-scientific, scientific mind of civilizations of color. And on. But the first question I always get asked is, so how do I make my tomatoes grow better? And I'm like, hell if I know. Put more chicken manure on it. But real talk, it's aspirin. Aspirin is really good for tomatoes. Or someone will ask you, how do I make the perfect roast chicken? First of all, I can tell you what Grandma and them told me for free. That's number one. You ain't appropriating me today. So that's the first little note we gonna make. Second of all, Google it. There's this lovely white lady named Anna Garden. She'll hook you up. And if she ain't gonna hook you up, talk to that felon, Martha, whatever her name is. But one of them gonna work. But I ain't giving you my secret to my roast chicken, so bye. I got a grandma and a mom in heaven, and they ain't trying to have that. You know, the great thing about not being Black or Latin in particular is that your dead people usually stay dead. But in our culture, they don't. So when you're in the kitchen, you go, I'm not gonna wash that plate. Clean as you go, and all of a sudden something falls in the refrigerator. You'd be like, okay, I'm washing that plate. You know what I'm talking about. Or you have the dream, and they talk to you, and it's like, okay, you see, I know you know what I'm talking about. That's my reality, and that sort of being haunted. And I say that in a loving and actually appreciative way that we have a relationship with our ancestors. Everybody, every culture does in some way or some form. But in our narrative, it's particularly salient and important. Being the Yoruba people part of whom I come from, I'm glad I can say that in 2019. Say that you have to be, Ifa says, you have to be able to call the names of 7 generations before you act on something. In other words, it's one thing to get your future or your present told, but before that, you have to pray to the 7 generations that came before you to make it happen, to give you that ashe that you need to move on to the next thing. So that's where I start. What's the how-to that I give you? The how-to I give you is not about how to grow things a certain way or how to cook things a certain way. In fact, I'm so deep in it, I can't explain those things to people. You know, it's like the elders were like, I can show you, but I can tell you, is what we learned. It was because some things, you know, you might notice something one year, you didn't see the next year in the ground. Or you might go in the kitchen one day and feel one kind of way, but not feel that same kind of way when you made the same dish 6 months later. So I can't really tell you how to have soul if you don't already have it. You know? I can't tell you how to have that spirit. It's something you have to cultivate. You know? Cultivation, agriculture, cultus, spirit, and sowing a seed and bringing it to harvest in Latin are the same linguistic process. So when we talk about this work, the how-to is heritage. The how-to is not going into the same hamster wheel that we are apparently addicted to. The hamster wheel of identity. Am I this? Am I that? Am I Black? Am I Negro? Am I colored? No, I'm African, thank you very much. I'm an African in America, and I'm both. And that is my worldview, my heritage, who I am. I come from a very proud people who survived a lot. But first and foremost, I'm a human being. As Terence, only a Roman who was African and formerly enslaved could say this. Terence the African said, "I am human, nothing is alien to me." That's a 2,000 plus year voice of our ancestor Terence, saying, all the possibilities, all the stories, all the narratives come through us. And it's because you can't put seeds in the ground, you can't expect a harvest without knowing its purpose. I sound like TD Jakes, don't I? Woman thou art loosed. And I realize I'm also in Georgia and giving this sermon, right? It's like the layers and levels, just like, wow. But what I mean is that people don't stop to consider that you have to have cultural literacy, that you have to have communal literacy, that you have to have historical literacy in order to truly bring some of the energy, the projects that we're working on to life. And also pass down a legacy that is clear and clean of myth, of half-truths, of doubt. You see, I said what I said about my identity because the other things have doubt laced in them in definition. There's no doubt. You know, we talked about the cooking gene in the introduction. I wrote a book because I went to my Southern Discomfort tour and thought it was gonna be one round. Didn't realize I was Southern Discomforting my whole life. I was gonna do some more of it. And the whole purpose was to begin to understand Southern food and African American foodways in the Deep South and their relationship to me. When everything that had already been done was about health disparity, which I appreciate, but I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not talking about our food as appropriated by corporations and fast food. I'm talking about our food as prepared by people who got it from the ground, from the air, and from the water, and made it at home. Those are two different narratives. And if you're Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latin, Latin, Native, Appalachian, you understand it's the same narrative, the same story. How do we avoid maintaining this cultural civil war that we have when we know for a fact, Southerners, I'm talking to you real quick, hold on. All Southerners, salt, pepper, and beyond. Listen up. First of all the feuding groups on the earth, nobody is more bound by genes and history and culture and blood like white and black Southerners. Now, caveat, white Southerners, you were the most African white people in the history of America. I'm here to welcome you to the family. I'm here to give you your full report. And don't come at me with, I already knew I was African. I'm Tanzanian from millions of years ago. No, baby. You African because of them blue gums you got and don't know where you got them from. There's more to come. Look at, and I say this for a reason. Food is not apolitical. When people say to me, I just want to sit down and eat something, and I don't want to hear about all that. What is all that? What is politics? To some people, politics is actually numbers and crunching and laws, and I'm a Washingtonian. I know about that kind of politics my whole life. That's not what you mean by politics. What you mean is race. What you mean is the position of women in our society. What you mean is whether or not you will tolerate people of different orientations. What you mean is whether or not you will tolerate. Whoa, the devil's a liar. That's okay, I can shout. And I don't just mean loud, I mean I dance, holler, scream. I may be Jewish, but I can feel the spirit like King David did. But yeah, it's all that stuff that people don't want to deal with. Labor politics, whether the food is sourced and it's fair, whether people are being paid a fair wage. I'm sorry. For someone to say the words, I don't want to hear all that, when you sit down and eat, but you'll police a woman's womb. That's deep, isn't it? You don't want to police the plate in terms of politics and fairness and equity and rights, but you'll. I can't believe you for your words when you say values are important to you, and yet the values around food, where it comes from, who's benefiting, who's not benefiting, who started it, who do we owe these ideas to? You know, it's remarkable that we have certain people in politics who will persecute an entire people the way your own people were persecuted and driven to the brink. But you have the audacity and the hypocrisy to go to one of Washington's finest Mexican restaurants and put the food of 10,000 years of genius in your mouth and not think twice about what you're doing to somebody's child. That is the flavor of hypocrisy that culinary justice seeks to unravel. There is food justice. There is the idea that people must have good, decent food, to have access to that food, so their kids can think in school, so they can be elders and be nourished in their days of wisdom, so they can be grown adults and not reach for the things that will kill them rather than will sustain them. And then there's culinary justice. Oppressed and marginalized people have the right to be empowered, to be centered, and to be sustained by the ideas that they've applied to their food, their cuisine, the tradition around making the food, their agriculture, their fishery, their foraging. We have the right to claim those things that we have innovated and invented. So that when you sit down to their plate of Mexican food, you're realizing this is not no Taco Bell nonsense, no Chipotle nonsense. This is 10,000 years of great mathematicians and pre-literate scientists developing the food that would feed the entire planet Earth. You think about that. You can't live without corn and tomatoes, squash. Can't go down South America with no peanut, no potato. 1/3 of the planet's food started in Mesoamerica and South America and the Caribbean. We're talking about an entire diet based on people looking at one little seed every day for thousands of years going, how do I make this better? But also, how do I make this better in concert with the earth? That's teosinte that becomes maize. Same thing with African folk. We've been growing rice for thousands of years, indigenous. We're the first people on earth to cook. We are your mamas and your daddies anyway. Your cousins. We're gonna get back to that research. I ain't done with my southern white folks though. We're gonna talk about that. But every cup of coffee, Ethiopia. Every cola drink, West Africa. Every domesticated house cat that catches the rats that eat your food, Nubia. Can't live without us. Can't live without us. Can't live without the heritage that we bring to the table and around the domestic sphere at all. The cooking gene was a part of my work because I figured out something. For years I've been told, what makes you different from, say for example, Sean Brock? I've had my public issues. I have peace with him now. But it was because our food media was telling stories roughly the same time as, the Paula Deen issue and, other folks on television about how Southern food was so popular and so important, how it came to be. And here's my thing. We were absent. We were missing. It's like we didn't even exist. Like people who were actually doing the food now didn't even exist. And the people who were doing food beyond soul food, beyond Southern food, who were of color didn't exist. we're not just doing our stuff well. We do sushi geniusly, French food geniusly. We have a whole history in this country, starting with and probably beyond James Hemings, enslaved Thomas Jefferson, a free man of color, being the best. James Hemings wasn't just any old enslaved cook. Every enslaved cook was a resistor. But you don't see that in popular media about slavery. Every time you see it, in fact, it's so bad that our kids run from our history now. They think you can have a Harriet. It's all just renegade, running around shooting folk. It's not calculated allyship. Are you for real? But our kids don't want to see movies, and I say kids, I mean people who are my generation down to the most recent. I don't want to hear about that slavery nonsense. Well, you don't have a history then. Yes, I know you were kings and queens before you were enslaved. Some of you were, not all of you. Let's be real. But I also know this. What kind of shame do you have when your people are the ones who made this democracy honest? What kind of shame do you have when you were the first to die for this country? What kind of shame do you have when the black woman's womb was the most valuable commodity America ever had? Who do you come from? What kind of shame do you have? Don't you know those cooks weren't those Gone with the Wind caricatures? Don't you know those cooks made sure that people got to freedom, themselves and others? Don't you know that when James Hemings said, okay, I'll be your chef, but guess what? You're gonna give me my freedom. He was 20 years old. 20-year-old mixed black man of color who had never been outside of a plantation in Virginia saying to his slaveholder, you will give me my freedom. I'm gonna learn a trade, I'm gonna learn how to read and write, I'm gonna become proficient in French, and you're gonna give me the gates to opportunity. And I'm gonna give those gates of opportunity to every single person in my family I teach. They never told you in school about when they had Underground Railroad, when they had black butlers and cooks, how in one town in New York, they heard that someone was gonna be chased down and brought back into slavery. So if white folks can't eat, nothing else gonna happen. So they all got out of their restaurants, their taverns, and formed a human chain. And while Broad Man was running, they stopped those folks with those guns. They said, what you gonna do, shoot everybody who works up here? You're gonna kill us, really? You know how valuable we are? See, that's why I do culinary history, because it's not this nonsense we're given. It's the subservient, submissive black. It's about people who use food to resist. Food is a source of empowerment. People who use food to do basic things. Okay, Southern white folks, let's go back to you for a second. Because you're my cousins. Inevitably, I'm related to some of you in this room right now. And that's deep. I know black folk, we gonna find some cousins today, I know. We gonna have that conversation, what county are people from, who you kin to, blah, blah, in 2 seconds, knew it. You look like cousin so-and-so. But I wonder sometimes, with a map that bleeds so red, look, I want you to think about this. Culinary justice for me is about giving credit where credit is due. It's about acknowledging the presence of these cultures that have shaped American life and other people's lives around the globe. It's also working within a very rich and troubled region like the South, where we know our cultures have mixed, have been diagrammed, have been separate, that we know that we have been a part of each other's genes and blood and bones and will be for quite some time. When you look at ancestry, you see your matches. And black folks, how many of you have this experience? You look at the pictures of your matches and you're like, dang, that's a lot of white folks. And they just keep coming, like thousands, like, whoa. And have you ever tried to reach out to them? My favorite expression, I have to check your family chart. Oh, wait a minute, hold up. I just told you that we match like hundreds of centimorgans together, which is doubtless a relative. And I just told you we come from the same county in Alabama. And I just told you, I just sent you my grandmama's picture, but just like your Confederate great-granddaddy's picture. And I sent you his other illegitimate black son's picture. And the name was even in my family line. And they were living in a census in the same household. But you gotta check my what? And I'm related to like hundreds of you in the same family name? For real. When I was in Mississippi not that long ago, I was giving this talk about the cooking gene and going to Africa and finding our roots and connecting the dots between Nigeria and Virginia and Benin and Louisiana and Senegal and South Carolina. And these bewildered people were sitting there looking like, really? What's African food? What's African about it? But after the presentation, about 15 brave souls got their book signed. And every single one of them, I'm not making this up, had the same exact words. Gergeloin's books. The same exact words. Well, now that I think about it, I had a colored mammy I was raised by. See, that don't hurt my feelings. I get it. The narrative of the black domestic as co-parent is deep. I don't know about that colored nonsense, or the mammy part, but I get it. But you knew that when you were sitting in that audience and your fellow white folks were like, I don't know what you're talking about. You knew when she put that little charm on your neck in 1945, when you fell that one time in the playground, she said, here, I'm gonna put a coin around your neck. You knew when she took you to church with her, and you said, wow, this is better than our church. You knew when your parents corrected your English, and you would say things like, Bubba and Tissy. That whole thing in the health where people got all upset because she was saying, I is smart. Forget the attempt at faking black English, but think of it this way. 100 years before that, she would have used words that came from Africa, telling that white child. One of the most prominent among them was, yum, yum. See, in Senegal, in Gambia, on the Wolof people, the Fulad people, the word to eat is nyam. In Gullah Geechee, the word to eat is nyam. In Jamaican patois, the word to eat is nyam. This child doesn't understand NY because that's not part of the English language. But the black woman feeding this child hears the words every day. Come on, eat up, yum yum. Associates that word with good food, passes it down, it ends up in your Webster's dictionary as origin unknown. Because every time it's us, it's origin unknown. Like Steven Tyler's lips, origin unknown. Until they did the little answers thing on him, and they're like, your oldest ancestor was a black musician from New Orleans. I was like, I'm glad you found a test to tell him. I would have kind of told him that myself. Mr. Aerosmith, origin unknown. We know that origin. If you can cool that soup, you got the origin. Some of y'all like Googling, what does he mean by cool that soup? Let's Google that. Right. He said this, and I don't know what that means, but okay, it's kind of fun. Okay, whatever. We're related. We're people that are related. But then, what makes you different from those white culinary figures that we just talked about? They should, but they don't have to work through the pain, the negative stuff. When we walk into the grounds of a former plantation, the minute our feet set foot, the minute we go back to West Africa, the minute your feet hit the ground, this thing happens to you that is unexplainable. You feel a blend of everything at once. simultaneously. I cook on plantations for part of my living. I cooked at a Wormslow plantation site. Every time I do it, it doesn't get any easier. However, I know what to expect, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And also from other people who, I used to get angry, I used to get mad, but then I understood something. We're not taught this. Our media doesn't actually reflect our real history. So when other people of different backgrounds are going into those spaces, they don't know how to handle the emotions, the facts, and the things that are hitting them. So I have to be patient with them to a point. One lady said to me in Williamsburg, she says, "Bless your heart." And I said, "Yeah, you get ready." She says, by the way, she had a certain hat on. We won't describe the hat. And she started crying. She says, "I know what it's like." Okay, don't say it, please don't. Like, I had that Nat Turner moment where I was like, I could literally hear Mama say one more time, and my ears growing louder and louder and louder. Like the war drums, like the fun version. Like Sidney Poitier was like, getting the hand ready. Like Celie and Mister. Where's Celie? Home, it's the shady Mister. And she goes, "I know what it's like to be like the slaves, because I'm an evangelical Christian in America." Lord. And then I said, "No, baby, bless your heart." And at that point, I'm to his credit, my partner who is white, who was very quiet white gay man, went off. And I said, "You've been hanging around me too much." And then those of you who are Gullah Geechee speakers, after this was all done, he basically told her, "You have no idea." He said, "I have no idea. And you surely shouldn't have said that." And he was as nice as he could be about it. And then later on, he said to me, and it cracked me up, he said, "Could you believe that, Buckra?" I said, "Bro, look in the mirror. You ain't an honorary black just yet." So calm it down, Malcolm X. "Could you believe that, Buckra?" I said, "Lord, I done made you something else. But the point is that we have to go into this work with so much crap to deal with. And we're not even talking about what it means to be a person of color cooking on a line at a restaurant. We're not even talking about what it means to be a black woman chef like my homegirl, my teacher, Mashama Bailey at the Gray. If you haven't, you know about the Gray? The Gray was the Greyhound station that was segregated. Now it's a restaurant headed by a black woman executive chef. Think about that. A young woman who, French culinary training, been around the world, came back home to Georgia to make a difference. I mean, that's not easy. That is so hard. You should hear what black culinary students tell me. They said, "We don't have any classes in our history, in our culture." And what they mean by we is the whole student body, not just black kids, not just brown kids. They want everybody to know the stories, the culture, the history. If you don't understand, like for me, making this information personal, going back through my 7+ generations, was important to me because I had to be able to talk with integrity about who I was, where I came from, and why. I'll be on my 6th trip to West Africa in the past 2.5 years this January to Sierra Leone, because I have to see it with my own 2 eyes. I didn't realize that, for example, when we were taught about enslaved people, not slaves, enslaved people, human beings, that when they talked about the labor, "Oh, you guys are just used to the heat and long hours and blah, blah, blah." Complete and utter racial nonsense. You go to West Africa, how many usual hours in a day are there? They're near the equator. There's 12. And in those 12 hours, which is not the 16 to 17 you working in North Carolina, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Maryland, Virginia, and beyond, You have rest periods. You get up very early, you work very hard in the cool of the morning. When it gets really hot in the middle of the day, you stop. Then you reconvene late afternoon, you work a couple more hours, then dinner, then rest, family time, you go to bed with the sun. That's it. You weren't being worked, hours upon hours upon hours in some cane field in Cuba or some cotton field in Veracruz. People forget that. This was not natural. It was not natural for people in Brazil to be dying after 6 years in a field. That was horrific. And then being used like tissues, that kind of stuff. And we wonder why our kids go, I ain't no damn slave, I don't want to be in no garden. We have to tell them though, no, I understand. You see those pictures and they make you feel a certain way, but let me tell you something. We're gonna plant a seed today. We're gonna plant this variety of sweet potato, or this variety of cane, and we're gonna get it to harvest. We're gonna process, it's gonna be yours, because it is yours. That Carolina Gold rice is yours. It is not the people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars off it, it's yours. It belongs to you. That is what culinary sovereignty means. This should be your opportunity first and foremost to make money from it, derive benefit from it, and to feed yourselves. If you can't feed yourself, you're not ready for a revolution. If you don't understand, I used to think that what I was doing was this kind of like reparative, sort of like a la Foxfire, work, But the reality is that work that those teenagers did back in the 70s, and anybody who's done, any young people in particular, who have taken upon themselves to learn their traditions, have done ever since, is actually a great lesson in survival. Because without those Appalachian folkways, without our Gullah Geechee folkways, without our folkways from all over the South, we have come to know how to grow things, how to build a home, how to survive. Those are really important things for one to have. Because if you do have a little patch of land, you can grow your own food, you've taken a lot of power out of the people who oppress you. And when that food comes from your tradition and matches your blood type and keeps you healthy, doesn't add to your susceptibility to chronic diseases, the power is times 2. And when that food has a story behind it that connects you and your children's children to their ancestors, it's times 10. So now I used to take for granted what I do, and now I don't, because I realize that so many people don't know how to bake a sweet potato. They don't know how to when the cane is ready to cut. They don't know when the persimmons are ripe, or a good rabbit from a bad rabbit to shoot, or when the shad are running. And I tell people all the time, please don't make me a niche product. My goal is to put myself out of business. All of us should have the same mentality. Do your work as if you are it. Do your work as if when you go, a catastrophe will happen. Because it will inspire you to make sure that future generations of Americans and Southerners of all backgrounds and colors will continue this work as if they are the last ones. One of the most profound things I ever saw in Africa, I went to the colloquial bush, and I'm seeing all kind of animals and fun things, and it's all good. And then we stopped at a tree. And this tree was a baobab. The baobab, the big, beautiful tree that can be hollow, but it's still alive. And they say that the roots are in heaven and the branches are on earth. And this particular baobab had a hollow shell. It was still living. It stored this liquid in the bark and the sides and the root. And in that hollow area was a pile of skulls. And they said to me, this is where the historians, the griots, the storytellers, this is where their remains are put. because they weren't farmers. They didn't go on the ground. They weren't working with the land. But the guide said, in our traditional path, these were the people who connected heaven and earth like the baobab does. And this is why, even though this is a park, the descendants of the griots, the people who are in that clan, those clan lines, come back here to bury their ancestors and to pay homage to them. And I'm looking in this tree. I didn't get too close. I look in this tree and I'm seeing the skulls of men and women who lived 500, 400, 300, 200 years ago, who saw the slave trade happen, who saw that transfer of knowledge and power and youthful strength from Africa to America and beyond. I felt the same thing I felt when I went to the grave of Alex Haley in Henning, Tennessee. And the words that came to my head were, don't be the last one. You can build up this archive and encyclopedia of early African American and West African knowledge in your head and your soul, but it is not to put a crown on your head, but to put a crown on the children you will not see. Don't be the last one. And that applies to all of our cultures in this room. None of them are safe, by the way. You realize that, right? That's how this works. It's a cycle of generation and extinction. It's a lottery. Some of us will make it out of it alive, some of us won't. But it is not your job to succumb to the facts of human nature. It is your job to fight and to survive and to live and to pass these things on. Why do you plant that black-eyed pea next to that corn? I don't know. Some of you know why. Nitrogen, fixer, legume, grass. Supports it. Watermelons. We have the three sisters. We didn't call them three sisters in Africa. We have the same system: gourds, melons, corn, sorghum, millet, cowpeas. We have the same exact system, but it didn't have the same name. But when we met with our native cousins and family, like, wow, seeing everybody together and that was the day I got my African ancestry results too. Because I said that the plantation was the place where our roots were taken, and that's the place where I wanted them to be restored. But then I have fools online talking about, oh, he dressed like a slave. Why he picking cotton? What kind of fool is he? He must be some Confederate apologist.
They don't know what they do.
Exactly. But when I hear you say that to me, and a collective love implied, I gotta remember that that's the energy I need to keep in mind when people send stupid nonsense I should not pay attention to. So thank you. Thank you. No, we have a couple questions over there. Yes.
I tried to say it loud. I gotta be brave, right? I was just wondering if you could speak to indigenous influences in your work, either historically or presently.
Thank you. So, cool fact. Our rumors of to my father's great pride, our rumors of native ancestry have been confirmed, although I knew that was so. But I often tell people that the issue behind that is about how we've juggled indigenous identity in this country. It's been weaponized. In Virginia, of course, was the most infamous case of just racializing Native identity to the point where it was like, Native recognition, which, by the way, I think is the biggest nonsense hornswoggle of a people ever. I don't know if you knew this or not, but for the Lakota people, for example, and their various branches to be recognized by the United States government, that represents thousands of dollars spent to get tribal recognition. For the Native American people of the Southeast, so the first to be contacted by the British and Spanish on this side of the ocean, who endured incredible incredible persecution and disease and exile. You cannot believe how much money is spent by the lesser known groups to get recognition. Can you imagine us going, okay, I want to be recognized as an African American. So what's your proof? My black ass is here. That's my proof. Did you see Roots? But imagine being a Native American, being Tutela Saponi, being other groups, and Nottoway, and then having to spend millions of dollars to have somebody recognize you as authentic based on a book written by somebody that look like you. Just want to bring that up. We got issues. But to speak to your comment, one of the most amazing things about talking about indigenous roots and foodways and its influence is that people forget that there is no America, there's no South, and no Southern food with indigenous people. And then it goes very deep because the interaction, it's not a simple story, and I like that. I like the fact that there are nuances to the narrative, particularly in the South. That there were Native people who held enslaved Africans. That there were Native people who gave sanctuary to enslaved Africans. That there were, tri-ethnic groups, European, African, and Native. That there were Natives and Africans who fought together against slavery, Maroons. That African crops become established in southeastern villages like black eyed peas and rice and sweet potatoes, which come full circle, right? But they're being made part of the southeastern native diet alongside corn, beans, and squash, which have already crossed the ocean to Africa. I didn't even know this until 3 or 4 years ago, that there were native people from Brazil and other places who were brought by the Portuguese across the ocean to Angola. So there are Africans around the day that have Native American ancestry who have never left the continent. So there's all these beautiful and important connections. And one of my good friends is Sean Sherman. He goes by the sous chef, which I love that, the sous chef. Think about that real quick. And he's Lakota and Dakota. And we had a dinner together in Minnesota. I was at Fort Snelling, at Bedote. Make that very clear. Because the Minnesota legislature said, we don't like you calling it Bedote. That's a native name, we don't like that. That's political correctness. No, that's being accurate. Anyways, he said to me, I didn't know why I was there. I thought, okay, I'm just a local color being brought in. Didn't realize this. There's always something to learn. There were white women and white men there, and white children, living in Fort Snelling, the officers and the soldiers. But they weren't doing the cooking. The vast majority of the cooks and domestic help were black women who were brought out of the St. Louis slave market. And not only that, but one of those black women was the wife of Dred Scott. Dred Scott and his wife lived there in Fort Snelling, along with a lot of black people, the biggest black population in Minnesota ever since. Just kidding. I kid you, Minnesota, I love you. Especially that Lego store. The Mall of America. Spent a whole tuition at that place. Listen, I'm sitting there with Sean. He's like, we're doing this dinner thing. He cooked. I didn't cook that. I just gave recipes. To be perfectly honest with you. And Sean is like, we walked around the property and he's like, this place is called Bedote. This is where the world began. Damn. Okay, hold on. He said, this is where my people said the world started. Where the Mississippi and the Missouri meet. And they took our creation space and they made it into their fort. But not only that, but they made it into a slave quarter for black people. And not only that, but when my great, I think it's great, he said, we walked around, he showed me this particular cell, and he said, that's where my great-great-great-grandmother was imprisoned by Abraham Lincoln. When the Dakota Warriors, you talk about defending your borders and your boundaries. He hung the Dakota Warriors, lynched them, and they took the wives and children to the mission schools. He said, that's the cell where they cut my grandmother's hair and told her not to speak her language. I'm crying and I'm upset because to hear people every day talk about human beings being illegal, defending their borders, and losing their cultural traditions when they're not. You don't know nothing about that. You never saw your people in your community lynched by the great emancipator, and your great-great-grandma had her hair cut off and told y'all to speak English and be a Christian when she damn well knew who God was. So I'm on fire now because it's just like, we have to do the kind of work that support each other. You know, Puerto Rico lost an incredible amount of indigenous knowledge with every storm. You gotta understand, there's Taino knowledge, Afro-Puerto Rican knowledge, Spanish Creole knowledge, all mixed together. Foodways that are irretrievable anywhere else on the planet. So we have to really think about what this means. We have to help each other survive cultural genocide, which is not just commercial and corporate, it's environmental. That's why environmental change is critical to address. But we also have to address these narratives. So when I see the legislature up there saying, we're not gonna give you funds because you call it Badote, I'm gonna write them, even though I'm not a Minnesotan, and go, no. You're gonna honor this land and the people who held this land and who are still on this land, still living and breathing as long as they're on this land. And you're gonna have my help doing it. I may only be 2% Native American, but I'm gonna use that 2% for all it's worth. Elizabeth. So I'm mad today. I'm in a mood because I was in a train for like, I don't know how many hours, from 10 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock this morning. So I'm in a mood today. I got a little bit of fire on me. Did I answer your question? Praise God. I do a Marco Rubio, have me some water. You cute though.
Hi, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to share something. So I am a daughter of Cambodian refugees, and one thing that my parents brought from, they ended up going through a few different camps in Thailand and the Philippines, but one thing that they brought from Thailand was a mortar and pestle, and that still exists in my family. Another thing I wanted to share is that the Khmer, which is the Cambodian language word for to eat, is ngam. So ngam bai means to eat rice. So that was like, I started crying when you said that. I was like, holy shit, sorry. But that is really, really cool. So I wanted to share that with you. Thank you so much.
Okay, my sister, I have to share something with you. So it amazes me that so I found out I was Mende and Tende and all these rice people, right? In West Africa. And the same thing. To eat rice is to eat. Have you eaten today? Right? Same thing, right?
Yeah.
This means, have you eaten rice today? And as somebody who is part South Carolinian, I gotta tell you, if I don't eat rice like virtually every day of my life, or at least several times a week, I feel like I haven't eaten.
Yeah.
And I just that mortar and pestle, that symbol. When we cook, right, as African and Asian people, we're very physical. We've lost that in the West, and we need to bring that back because food isn't just the table. Food is the wringing of the chicken's neck. Sorry, vegans, I love you. Food is the mortar and pestle. Food is the mano and metate. It's the physical part of it, and that the labor that makes you love what's on your plate. And I also want to say this. Thank you for being a fellow American. I recognize the struggle that your family went through, and I'm proud of the struggles that we went through to make it so that everybody could have a right to be at the same table. So I can't thank you enough. And thank you for being a fellow human being who eats rice. Because the rest of them don't know what they're missing out on.
Peace. It's an honor to have you share your journey with us. even sitting here listening, I just felt, as the spaces you went to, I felt that. The stories you shared of others that you encountered, I felt it as well. So in this work that you do, in this service to humanity, how do you process all of the things that you touch, take in, and see?
Okay, that's a good one. Because self-care is the word of the day, right? And I gotta tell you something, I didn't think about that. I didn't think about it. I didn't get it. I would go into these spaces, I'd do my presentation, I would learn as much as I could about the people who were there, what was growing in the land. I've done this in every slaveholding state except for Oklahoma. And you learn these facts, you try to make your presentation accurate. You're so busy trying to be professional, you forget you're a person. And then you forget something. If you're not metaphysical, if this is absolute nonsense to you or doesn't fit your worldview, I can understand. Please don't think I'm discounting the worldview of people who choose not to engage that way. I do respect you. But what I'm saying is, as someone who does come from that tradition, that narrative, that culture, and that personal opinion, personal worldview, it is a metaphysical, spiritual, whatever experience. If nothing else, it's personal and emotional. It's a mental workout. And part of that self-care process I had to learn when I went to West Africa. I thought I knew what the deal was going to be because I worked on these plantations and all this work. Right? I thought I was cool. I thought I was strong. You know, the elders just say, "Can you hang?" My first 2 minutes at Goree, And then when I went to Ghana, it was even worse. I went to Cape Coast and Anamabu. And what killed me was that I knew from all my statistics and all my history, all my research, that my Ghanaian ancestors, one of whom left his story and it was passed down to my family. And I found out through DNA that the story was accurate. That line was completely 100% Ghanaian, Akan, Ashanti. And I knew that my grandfather's people, his direct line was Akan also, and Eve. So I'm standing in these two major places where one or most of them, all of them came through. That door is the same door, no question about it. One of my people was walking through that door. And the funny thing is, when I went to Elmina, I didn't feel it. Same kind of building, right? Same kind of thing. I didn't have that gut feeling of, he was here, she was here. But when I went to Cape Coast, I remember going down into the darkness of the men's dungeon. Didn't take very long. I couldn't go in the women's dungeon at all. There was some kind of wall, I just couldn't, I said no. There's so much negativity, evil. To give you an example, there was a slot, like a mailbox slot. The women who refused to the sexual advances of the British and Portuguese were fed through that slot. And I said, no way in hell I'm going there. I will come out with some spirits on me. It ain't gonna be good. So I'm telling you, the self-work that I have to do is remind people, first of all, this is not easy. You go in a respectful, spiritual manner. When you go out, you have to do some separation. I hate to tell you this, but not all ancestral spirits are good. They're not all happy. Some of them are really upset. They're still gonna be upset. So they get on you. And they get in your brain and your soul, and you feel this energy, this heaviness. Or the best way I can describe it is you're like a door. They're walking through you, and they're very happy that you're there because no one's talked about them in years. No one's named them. So when I go to Williamsburg and I do my thing there, I will actually name out the entire list of enslaved people on the Peyton Randolph property. And I talk about how Betty was the cook, and Betty had daughters, and this is her space. And I never burnt one piece of chicken in her space, by the way. I wonder why. But the bottom line is you have to go in respectfully, to leave respectfully. You have to do things that separate yourself from the experience. It's very important for me to shower, to have quiet time, to take off my interpreter's clothes, to light a candle, do whatever I gotta do. To not talk to people for a while. And then once that's done, I turn something really stupid on TV. My best show is that Bigfoot show. They never gonna find Bigfoot. But for me, forms of entertainment like that help me decompress something very heavy. I didn't realize I'm carrying all this heavy stuff, right? You know, I taught the show in Hebrew school for several years. And I had to do things that, when I got done teaching my 7th graders about the Holocaust, I had to do stuff to separate myself from the energy that I was attached to. So one of the bigger parts of it is this. The flip side is this. Part of the ways that we deal with being unrooted is by culturally rooting ourselves. We look for the things in our culture that are supposed to be about joy and happiness and celebration and constructive memory. Food is a fantastic way of doing that. Sometimes I'll endure some painful genealogical stuff or whatever. Then I gotta decompress. I gotta cook. So I invite my grandmother, my mother, my other grandmother, my grandfathers into the kitchen with me. And I call people up and say, I gotta feed you. But I already have dinner, I don't care. Come in my house. I have food. You're getting a Michael Twitty meal for free. Shut up, get in the car, come over. Get in the Uber. We're gonna eat. And so all of a sudden the table is my friend Yusuf, who's from Saudi Arabia, and a friend of mine who is a Filipino gay writer, and some sisters that I know who are Muslim, and everybody, we're all sitting around the table. Different backgrounds, different colors, everything. My best friend Mike growing up Italian and Jewish. And so why are we here? Because y'all gonna eat. And I bring the big African pot out that I got in Ghana, dish out the food, and we just talk. So wow, that was really cool. What's the story behind it? The story behind it is da-da-da-da. One of the most important ways to heal from oppression is celebrate who the hell you are. To be in love, to be thankful for the opportunities that you have in your daytime and space, to hear other people's narratives and help heal them. That's how this works. Help heal them, help be good. And that's how I do my self-care. It took me a long time. I've been doing this for 15 some years, okay? It took me that long to learn a process. And also say to myself certain messages like, you know what? When you don't want it, there are days when I don't want to do it. I'll be real with you. And I just say, guess what? Your board of directors, they blessed you. Now be a blessing. Thank you for that.
I think we're out of time, and I think people are going to move on to self-care at the reception. And I would love to thank you so much and honor you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.